Ka poured herself a glass of water and sat by her window, the bouquet reflecting in the glass like a fragile promise. The night air carried the faint hum of Lagos traffic, a city alive with ambition and chaos, yet she felt a rare calm settling over her apartment. She let herself breathe, letting the memories of Obira drift like smoke across the room. She didn't hate him. She didn't despise him. She simply existed without needing him for the first time in years. Days turned into weeks. Ka immersed herself fully in her fashion empire. Her designs were no longer just clothing. They were statements of resilience, of identity, of reclaiming power. Every piece she released carried a story, stitched quietly into hems, embroidered into fabrics, whispered in the movement of models across her runway. The world took notice, but Ka hardly needed it. She had already noticed herself. Obira tried reaching out again. Calls went unanswered. Messages left unopened. But every once in a while, she caught a glimpse of him in her life through mutual acquaintances, glimpses that hurt in the softest, most curious ways. He was changing too. He had slowed down, shed some of the arrogance that once clung to him like perfume, and seemed human. That was the hardest part. Not that he had erred, but that he was learning, growing, while she had already been doing the same, silently on her own. One afternoon, Ka was invited to speak at a women's empowerment forum. Lagos Island's skyline stretched endlessly behind her, glass and steel reflecting the heat of ambition Ka had come to understand. She shared her journey, not her heartbreak, not her past, but the lessons, the quiet victories, the way fear had once tried to cage her, and how she had learned to dance with it instead. Women in the audience nodded, some shedding tears. Some smiled with recognition. She realized she had found her voice not in someone's validation, but in her own reflection, in the faces of others who needed it. After the event, Ka returned to her studio, tired but satisfied. The bouquet from that night of the show still sat on her bedside table, white lilies gleaming in the morning light. She touched one softly. A note had never left her hands. It didn't need to. It was there, a marker of a love that existed once, not a chain that bound her now. She poured herself another cup of tea, sat by the large windows, and let Lagos breathe through her. A week later, T, her closest confidant and business partner, came into the studio, carrying a stack of design sketches. "You've been quiet," he said carefully. He always knew when something wasn't being said. Ka gave him a small smile. "I've been listening," she replied. "To myself." T nodded, settling on the edge of a chair. "I like it," he said simply. "This you. Whole. Free. Fearless. And still compassionate." Ka laughed softly, a sound that had once been rare. Compassion is easier when you're not waiting for someone to hurt you again. T leaned back considering. "And Obira?" Ka froze just slightly. Her eyes drifted to the skyline. "He exists in a past that I've learned from, not in my future." T smiled knowingly. "Then let's make sure your future is something even you couldn't have imagined." Weeks became months. Ka's fashion empire expanded. She traveled to Dubai, Paris, and Milan, not for validation, not for fame, but because her creativity demanded it. In every city, she met people whose stories reminded her of her own. Struggles, fears, dreams. She was no longer just Ka the designer. She was Ka the woman who refused to shrink herself for anyone, who understood that self-love was not selfish but essential. Meanwhile, Obira didn't fade away. He stayed in the peripheries, slowly but persistently. He sent no messages directly to her, no sudden appearances in her life. He had learned the hard lessons too. Instead, he focused on himself, on repairing relationships he had neglected, on doing work that mattered beyond his wealth and influence. He became a quiet presence in the industry, a man attempting to balance power with empathy. Then one rainy evening, Ka was back at Victoria Island, overseeing the setup for a pop-up show. Lagos rain swept across the city, reflecting neon lights on wet streets. She moved with calm precision, instructing her team, adjusting a dress here, a pose there, her mind fully present in her craft. And then she felt it. The same weight, the same presence that had haunted her heart years ago. Obira was standing near the entrance, holding an umbrella against the torrential rain. He didn't approach immediately. He just watched. And she, unflinching, poised, unafraid, watched back. After a moment that felt like both an eternity and a heartbeat, he stepped closer, lowering his umbrella. "Ka," he said softly. Not with demand, not with plea, just acknowledgement. "You look radiant." Ka didn't flinch. She smiled politely. "Obira." Her voice held no accusation, no bitterness, just recognition. I've tried to understand," he said, careful with each word. "What I did, what I lost. And I still—" He stopped. He swallowed. "I still think of you. But I know thinking isn't enough. I know you need." "I don't need anything from you," she said gently. "And I'm not asking for anything from you either. Not anymore." He nodded slowly, pain and admiration coexisting in his expression. "Then I'll just exist here quietly, respectfully, until the world allows us to speak again." Ka considered him for a moment. She saw the man who had caused her pain, and also the man attempting to redeem it, not through grand gestures, but through patience, humility, and time. She wasn't ready to forgive him fully, not yet, but she could acknowledge growth. She could acknowledge effort. "Then, exist," she said finally. "But don't expect me to stop being who I am. Don't expect me to pause my life for anyone, even you." Obira's lips curved into a faint, understanding smile. "I wouldn't dream of it." The night passed with the pop-up show unfolding seamlessly. Models moved like shadows and light, fabrics flowing like water across the stage. Ka's vision realized once again. Obira watched from the back, quietly, respectfully. She didn't notice him most of the time, and that was exactly how it should be. After the show, as the rain slowed, Ka returned to her apartment. The bouquet, her constant, silent reminder, had been moved to a vase by the window again. She ran her fingers over the petals, now slightly damp from the storm's humidity. She thought of Obira, of the note, of the man who had loved her imperfectly, and now, perhaps wisely. And she smiled. Because she was whole. Weeks later, she found herself at a private gallery event. Her designs on display not as clothing, but as living art. Obira appeared again, this time at a distance, exchanging polite nods with her team. He didn't approach her. He didn't speak. He simply existed in the same space, and she in hers. The proximity was enough, proof that the past could coexist with the present without destruction. During a quiet moment, Ka stepped onto the terrace overlooking Lagos Lagoon. The water reflected the city lights, the kind of reflection that made one feel small and infinite at the same time. She breathed deeply, inhaling the scent of rain and city heat, feeling every pulse of life around her. She remembered the girl who once cowered behind anchors and oversized jackets, who had trembled at the thought of standing in her own power. That girl had grown, had fought, had won. Obira was watching from the interior, hands folded. He didn't interrupt her solitude. And that was perhaps the greatest act of love he could now offer, respecting her space, her independence, her choice to define her own happiness first. Ka turned back to the room, her team bustling around, congratulating her on yet another successful unveiling. She joined them, laughing freely, the kind of laughter that belonged to someone untethered, alive. She caught Obira's glance briefly, and for the first time she didn't feel the old ache, only a quiet understanding. Two people, changed by time and circumstance, both stronger, both aware. Two paths that had diverged and might, in some future, converge. But only if it was not a repetition of the past. Only if love came without fear, without trauma, without shadows demanding their due. As Ka moved back into the room, she felt the air shift. T caught her eye and nodded. She nodded back. They had built something more than fashion. They had built a sanctuary of purpose, creativity, and resilience. Obira lingered at the threshold for a moment longer, then turned, slipping quietly into the Lagos night. Ka didn't watch him leave. She didn't need to. She was not waiting for him, and she wasn't running from him. She was simply Ka. And Lagos, vast, restless, chaotic, glittering under the night sky, stretched endlessly before her. And so did her life. A few days later, a message arrived. Not from Obira this time, but from Amaka. He asks only for patience and to witness your light from afar. He promises nothing else. Ka smiled, setting her phone down. That was fair. That was enough. She didn't need closure, not in the old sense. She had grown into her own light, and now anyone who wanted to be near it had to respect the warmth, not smother it. Her mirror reflected her back. Radiant, independent, whole. And perhaps someday, if the stars and Lagos and life allowed, there could be a new story with Obira. Not a story of rescue, of fear, or of loss, but one of equal souls, healed, choosing, not needing to be together. For now, Ka focused on her empire, her family, her friends, her city, and herself. Her story paused, yes, but it pulsed with potential, with freedom, with life. Obira's message arrived next. I will wait. Not to claim you, but to see you shine. Always. She read it, smiled, locked the phone, and turned to face her designs, her team, her dreams. She didn't need to answer. Not yet. She was too busy building herself, the world around her, a life that didn't depend on anyone else's redemption. And outside, Lagos glittered, vigilant, patient, eternal. For Ka, and perhaps one day for Obira too, the story had not ended. It had only begun again, in a new form. Days stretched into weeks, yet the memory of Obira's quiet presence at the pop-up show lingered in Ka's mind. Not as a pang of longing, but as a subtle echo, a reminder that life moved in parallel paths and sometimes collided without warning. She immersed herself fully in her work, and for the first time, she felt untethered from fear and expectation. Every fabric she touched, every sketch she drew, became a reflection of her strength and her freedom. The Lagos mornings had a rhythm now that Ka had come to embrace. She would wake early, run along the marina, the water sparkling with the reflection of the rising sun and the city skyline. She often imagined her life as a series of threads, some bright, some frayed, some tangled, and she was finally learning how to weave them into something purposeful. Some threads were for the past, some for the present, and some, unpredictably, beautifully, were for the future. Obira remained a silent shadow in this tapestry. Occasionally, Ka would hear of him through her circle. Through tea, through Amaka, through people who attended the same shows and events. He had changed. Not visibly at first, not in the way of outward displays of wealth or status, but in demeanor, in the way he spoke to people, in the way he seemed to approach life with a steadier hand. And Ka, though she had stopped waiting for him, observed this quietly, noting the shifts without letting them disturb her equilibrium. One afternoon, Ka's team prepared for a private showcase for potential international investors. The event was to be held in a converted warehouse near Victoria Island, a raw space transformed into a minimalist paradise. Ka moved through the preparations with surgical precision, testing lighting angles, checking the folds of fabric, adjusting accessories. She noticed how far she had come. There was no panic, no self-doubt, only clarity. She had learned to trust herself in a way she never had before. When the guests began to arrive, she moved among them like a force of nature, confident and poised. Investors whispered in awe at the details. Photographers snapped candid shots, and models practiced the final walk. Amid the bustle, she felt it again, the weight of someone's gaze. She didn't turn immediately. Letting the moment linger, she allowed herself to feel what it was without letting it control her. When she finally looked, there he was. Obira, at the back of the room, unannounced, unobtrusive, watching. No fanfare. No expectation. Just presence. Ka's chest tightened briefly. Not from fear, not from love, but from recognition. She had known this man intimately once, and now she saw him anew, not through the lens of longing or hurt, but with clarity. He was different. He had changed. But she had changed too. Obira noticed her glance and nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. No words. Nothing more. And that was enough for now. The showcase began. Models glided through the space, garments flowing like poetry. Each outfit was a narrative, an echo of Ka's journey. Bold yet delicate, confident yet approachable, reflective of pain turned into power. Investors murmured in admiration, some leaning in to inspect details, others taking mental notes for future collaborations. Ka moved among them, her hand steady, her smile warm. She was not performing for Obira. She was performing for herself and the world she was creating. After the showcase, as guests filtered out, Ka found a quiet corner to collect herself. The adrenaline of the event lingered in her bloodstream, leaving her simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted. And then she felt the presence behind her. "You're incredible," Obira said softly, not loud enough for anyone else to hear. Ka turned slowly, meeting his eyes. There was no anger there, no plea, only honesty, and perhaps the shadow of regret. "I've seen you grow," he continued, "and I've been learning too." Ka nodded, her expression serene. "We've both learned," she said, her voice steady. "And some lessons take longer than others." He hesitated, then asked, "Can we talk? Really talk?" Ka considered it. The thought of reopening dialogue with him stirred old feelings, vulnerable, delicate threads of memory. But she didn't fear them anymore. She could meet them without losing herself. "Yes," she said finally, "we can talk. But let's be honest, Obira. We're not children anymore. We are not the same people who collided so violently years ago." He nodded, relief washing over his face. "I understand. I want to say things properly, without trying to justify the past or ask for forgiveness. I just want you to know I see you now. I see you fully." Ka allowed herself to smile faintly. "Then start there." They stepped aside, away from the residual buzz of the showcase, and the conversation began. Not with recriminations, not with confessions of heartbreak, but with truth. Obira spoke of his fears, his mistakes, the ways he had tried to control outcomes from a place of insecurity rather than love. Ka listened, not defensively, not with judgment, but with empathy. The empathy born of distance, of reflection, of survival. "I don't expect anything from you," Obira said finally. "I don't expect a second chance. I don't want to interfere with your life. I just wanted you to know what I've learned." Ka felt the weight of his words, but she remained unmoved. Not coldly, but firmly, like the roots of a tree planted deep. "I hear you," she said. "And I appreciate honesty. It's rare. But the love you speak of, it existed once. And it may exist again someday. But not today. Not like this. Not without both of us standing whole, unbroken, without old ghosts shaping our choices." Obira nodded, understanding more than she realized. "Then I'll wait," he said softly. "Not to claim you, not to tether you, not to ask for your love. I'll wait. Quietly. And when the time is right, if ever, it will be because we are ready, not because we are afraid." Ka studied him. This version of Obira, humble, patient, self-aware, was a man she could respect. And respecting him did not mean she owed him anything. She could care for someone without letting that care define her. "Then wait," she said simply. "But remember, I am not the girl you once knew. And you are not the man I once feared. If paths cross again, it will be as equals. Only as equals." He nodded, a small smile forming. It was not triumphant, nor victorious. It was quiet, tentative, respectful. He left her then, stepping back into the bustling streets of Lagos, leaving Ka to her solitude, her city, her life. In the following weeks, Ka's work took her deeper into the international circuit. Milan, Paris, New York. Cities that buzzed with creativity, competitiveness, and ambition. She thrived. Each runway, each show, each collaboration reminded her that the world was vast and she had only just begun to explore it fully. Obira's shadow lingered in the back of her mind, but it no longer controlled her heart. It was simply a note in a larger symphony. Obira, meanwhile, continued to transform himself quietly. He volunteered at local charities, mentored young entrepreneurs, and began investing in causes that mattered rather than only in ventures that yielded profit. The lessons Ka had learned painfully years ago had finally reached him. And while he had loved her imperfectly, he now understood the weight of love's responsibility. Not to possess, but to nurture and support without expectation. One rainy Lagos evening, Ka returned from a long meeting to find a small package at her doorstep. Wrapped simply in brown paper and tied with a ribbon, It was a bouquet of white lilies and red roses, accompanied by a single card. She recognized the handwriting immediately. She placed the bouquet on her table and held the card. It read, "I continue to see your light from afar. No expectation, only admiration. And when the day comes that the past and present can meet without fear or pain, I hope we can meet again. Obira." Ka smiled faintly. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The gesture was not a plea. It was a statement, patient and quiet, like the man who had learned to love without tethering, without demanding. She sat by her window, watching Legos shimmer beneath the rain. Reflections of streetlights danced on wet asphalt, a reminder of the city's rhythm, its chaos, its beauty. And she realized something profound. Love, like life, did not always demand immediate answers. Sometimes it was enough to witness, to exist, to allow growth in parallel. In the weeks that followed, Ka's personal life became a tapestry of small victories, quiet joys, and subtle reflections. She met new people, forged friendships, nurtured her creative partnerships, and continued to rebuild her family relationships. Every success, every laugh, every moment of stillness reaffirmed the lesson she had learned so painfully years ago. She was enough. She had always been enough. Obira remained present in the periphery. Sometimes she would see him at events. Other times she would hear about his endeavors through mutual friends. Each time she observed him not as a threat, not as a longing, but as a measure of how far both of them had come. And she could not deny a quiet, gentle hope that maybe, one day, their paths would converge again, not out of necessity but choice. One evening, as Lagos glimmered beneath the twilight, Ka stood on her balcony, the city stretching endlessly below. She held a glass of wine, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Obira, then back to herself, to the woman she had become. Strong, independent, radiant, whole. And in that moment, she understood that love, true love, was not about possession or fear or needing someone else to complete you. It was about witnessing, respecting, and supporting growth, both in oneself and in others. It was about patience, about learning to wait without desperation, about building a life that no one could disrupt, not even someone you had once called home. Lagos, sprawling and restless, continued its rhythm. Ka, standing tall amidst the city's chaos, realized that her story was far from over. It was only pausing, stretching into possibilities yet unseen, moments yet unclaimed. Obira's shadow lingered, not as a weight, but as a reminder of love's capacity for transformation. And so, Ka lived. She thrived. She created. She loved herself fiercely and unapologetically. And somewhere, quietly, Obira did the same, each of them learning, growing, waiting. Not for each other, but for the versions of themselves that could one day meet without fear, without trauma, without the past dictating the terms. Their story did not end. It paused. It breathed. It waited. And for Ka, for Obira, for the city that bore witness to their lives, it was enough. Weeks turned into months. Lagos moved around Ka like an endless river. Unpredictable, fast, and always luminous. She had grown into the rhythm of her city and her own life. Her apartment overlooked the lagoon, and she would often stand by the window, watching the water reflect neon lights and passing boats, thinking about how far she had come. The city hummed beneath her, carrying both opportunity and chaos, and she thrived in the pulse. Her work had evolved beyond fashion shows and private showcases. She was now collaborating with local artisans, discovering hidden talent, and turning forgotten crafts into contemporary pieces. Every stitch, every fold, every pattern carried a story, and Ka had learned to let her own story inform the work without letting it define her. She was independent, fully, and each project became a declaration of that independence. Obira remained a quiet figure at the edges of her life. Occasionally, she would hear of him through mutual contacts. A successful philanthropic endeavor, a subtle gesture at a business launch, a contribution to a project she cared about. Nothing personal, nothing directed at her. Just a man trying to find his place in a world he had once tried to control. She observed him silently, not with longing but with acknowledgement. He was different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced with a measured humility that she recognized immediately. But Ka had learned to love herself first, and so she remained untethered. One afternoon, Ka returned to the studio from a client meeting in Lekki. The air was thick with humidity, and the streets of Lagos glistened with the remnants of a light rain. As she navigated traffic in her car, she noticed a figure waiting near the corner of the studio building. Her heart skipped a fraction, though she knew she shouldn't recognize him by sight alone. It was Obira. He didn't approach immediately. He stood at a distance, umbrella in hand, eyes scanning the bustling street, unassuming, patient. She parked and stepped out, adjusting her bag over her shoulder, pretending not to notice him. But she felt the weight of his presence like a current against her skin. He caught her gaze finally, offering a small, respectful nod. Ka nodded back, neutral, calm, unshaken. There was no expectation in his eyes, only acknowledgement, a man attempting to exist near her without imposing. She admired that restraint more than she would ever admit. Inside the studio, the team was busy with preparations for a large client event. Ka moved with precision, checking fabrics, instructing models, reviewing lighting setups. She didn't speak of Obira. She didn't need to. He waited outside the office, not intruding, not interrupting. And for the first time, she realized how much space, literal and figurative, could be an act of love. Hours passed. The event unfolded perfectly, and by late afternoon, the city's light had softened into a rich orange glow over the lagoon. Ka stepped onto the terrace to breathe, feeling the humidity stick to her skin, feeling alive in a way she hadn't in years. And then she felt it again. The familiar weight, the awareness that someone was watching without judgment, without expectation. Obira had stepped onto the terrace quietly. She turned slowly, meeting his gaze. There was no guilt, no apology in his eyes, only quiet honesty. "You look well," he said softly. Ka allowed herself a small smile. "I am," she replied, calm and steady. "And you?" "I've been learning," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Every day. Trying to understand the things I didn't before." Ka nodded slowly, studying him. "And do you?" "Yes," he said after a pause. "I do. Not perfectly. Not entirely. But enough to know that some things are bigger than pride, bigger than fear." Ka inhaled deeply, the humid Lagos air filling her lungs. "Some things, yes. But bigger things can also be quiet, unnoticed. Growth doesn't always demand attention. Not from anyone. Especially not from me." Obira smiled faintly. "I understand. That's why I don't demand anything from you. Not today. Not ever unless, if ever, it's your choice." Ka allowed herself a laugh, soft, a sound she had almost forgotten she could produce without tremor. "You speak in hypotheticals," she said lightly. "A cautious philosopher." "I've learned caution," he admitted, "and patience, and respect." Ka considered him, letting the words settle. She saw him fully, not the man who had hurt her, not the one who had tried to control her life, but a version shaped by lessons, by reflection, by time. She had changed too. She no longer recoiled at the sight of him, nor did she feel the old ache of longing. She was observing, acknowledging, accepting. "Obira," she said finally, "if this is what it takes for us to exist in the same space without past pain interfering, then it's working." He nodded slowly, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "Then I'll wait," he said quietly, "as long as you need. Not to claim you. Not to anchor you. Just to witness your light, even from a distance." Ka smiled faintly. "Then do that. And know that I am grateful for it. That will have to be enough for now." And it was enough. Over the following weeks, Ka and Obira existed in this delicate balance. Near enough to observe each other, distant enough to remain whole. They began to see each other at industry events, not always speaking, sometimes exchanging only nods or smiles. Their lives ran parallel, intersecting occasionally like rivers brushing against each other's banks without flooding. It was a dance they were learning together, silently, carefully, without expectation or demand. Ka's work continued to flourish. She opened a second studio in Ikeja, this one larger, filled with natural light, space for artisans to craft, and room for experimentation. She hired young designers she had mentored in previous projects, giving them creative freedom and trust. She worked late nights, sketching, designing, planning, her mind alive with possibilities. Obira's life had shifted too. He spent more time investing in socially conscious projects, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and supporting arts and culture initiatives. Occasionally, his team would contact Ka's team for collaborations, mutual respect forming the foundation for interaction without intrusion. Slowly, the world they shared began to feel less like a battlefield and more like a stage where growth and respect coexisted. One evening, as the sun dipped behind Lagos skyline, Ka was finishing a series of sketches for a private client collection. She paused to rest, stretching her shoulders, and noticed a figure in the studio doorway. Obira. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak immediately. He entered slowly, hands folded, expression calm. "I didn't come to disturb," he said. "I came to see. To witness. Nothing more." Ka set her pencil down and nodded. "Then you may," she said simply. He moved to the corner of the room, observing her work with quiet respect. He didn't comment, didn't critique, didn't claim authority. He simply existed in the space without taking from it. And in that presence, Ka realized how rare it was to see someone truly try to exist without control or expectation. "You're remarkable," he said after a long pause. "Not just the work you." Ka smiled faintly, a smile born of self-possession, not need. "Thank you," she said. "And you are learning." Slowly, carefully. "But you are learning." "I have to," he said quietly. "Not for anyone else. Not for you. But for myself. For the man I want to be." Ka nodded. "Then that is enough. For both of us." They spent a long while in silence, the air thick with unspoken understanding. The Lagos skyline outside the window shimmered in the evening light, reflecting streets and rivers and a city that moved relentlessly. And here, in a quiet corner, two people existed together, fully, without needing to possess each other, without fear, without demand. Obira eventually left, as quietly as he had arrived. Ka returned to her sketches, her mind clear, her heart calm. The city continued its pulse outside her window, oblivious and magnificent. And for the first time in years, Ka felt completely unshaken by the idea of a possible future, whatever it might hold. In the following weeks, the same pattern continued. Ka thrived in her empire. Obira remained on the peripheries, a constant witness but no longer a haunting presence. When they did speak, it was brief, honest, and without expectation. Their conversations were no longer about the past, nor were they about promises. They were about acknowledgement, recognition, respect. Ka realized something important. Love did not always need to be declared, possessed, or rushed. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes it existed in proximity, in observation, in understanding. And in that quiet she had found freedom. One late evening, she stood on the balcony of her new studio in Ikeja, looking at the sprawling city below. Lagos shimmered with life. Traffic lights, street lights, river reflections, neon signs flickering in the humid air. She took a deep breath, the kind that filled her lungs and her chest and reminded her that she had survived, that she had thrived, that she was whole. A message arrived on her phone. She glanced at it. It was Obira. Not demanding, not pleading. Just a simple note. Witnessing you thrive is enough. For now. Ka smiled, setting the phone aside. That was enough. Because for the first time, she knew she didn't need closure. She didn't need a reunion. She didn't need an explanation. She only needed presence, respect, patience, and growth. Both hers and his. And in that moment, she understood something more profound than love, more vital than reconciliation. The world was vast, time was patient, and life could be lived fully even in pause, even in waiting, even in the quiet existence of two people changed but not yet entwined. Obira existed in the same city, living his own growth. She existed in her empire, living hers. And one day, perhaps, those paths would intersect in a way that would honor both of their journeys. Until then, she thrived. She loved herself first. She created. She expanded. She lived. And Lagos, vibrant, restless, endless, watched. Months passed, and life settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and strange. Ka had fully embraced her independence, her work, her city. Every morning, she rose early to run along the marina, the water catching the first hints of sunrise like molten gold. It reminded her that the city, like life, kept moving whether she noticed it or not. And she had learned to move with it rather than against it. Obira had become a quiet presence at the edges of her world. Sometimes she would hear of him through mutual friends, a donation to an arts program, a subtle involvement in a local NGO, a small gesture of support for an artisan she had helped launch. He never intruded directly, never reached out personally, and that restraint mattered more than she could articulate. It was respect without expectation, an acknowledgement of growth on both sides. Ka's work had flourished. She opened a new studio in Ikeja, one that blended modern design with space for traditional artisans. The walls were lined with sketches, fabrics, and half-finished garments, each a testament to her vision and her journey. She had built a team she trusted implicitly, people she had mentored and who now mentored others, creating a network of creativity that stretched beyond Lagos. One Thursday evening, Ka stayed late in the studio, working on a special collection inspired by Lagos itself. Its chaos, its beauty, its contradictions. She moved between fabrics, sketches, and mood boards, her mind alive with patterns and possibilities. The city outside was a blur of lights and movement, but inside, the studio was a cocoon of focus and intent. A soft knock at the door pulled her out of concentration. She looked up to see Obira standing there, umbrella in hand, slightly damp from the rain. He didn't speak immediately. He simply stood watching, waiting. Ka straightened, holding her composure. "You're here again," she said, neutral. Not cold, not warm, just acknowledging. "I am," he replied quietly. "I thought I'd check on the progress. From afar, as always. But sometimes I need to see it. To see you in your element." Ka studied him. She noticed the calm in his posture, the way he didn't try to command space or attention. The arrogance of the past was gone, replaced with quiet respect. "You may look," she said finally, "but don't touch anything." He nodded, smiling faintly. Understood. And so he did. He moved to the corner of the room, observing her at work. He didn't ask questions, didn't critique, didn't try to insert himself into the process. He simply watched her create, and in doing so, he honored the woman she had become. Ka felt a strange calm in his presence. She was aware of him, yes, but she wasn't unsettled. She didn't feel the old ache of longing or betrayal. Instead, she felt a quiet acknowledgement that both of them were growing, learning, existing in proximity without possession. Hours passed. The rain outside had intensified, drumming lightly against the glass roof of the studio. Ka paused to stretch, noticing the muscles in her shoulders and back finally relaxing after long days of work. She looked at Obira, who still observed quietly. "Do you ever get tired of watching from the sidelines?" she asked softly. He considered her question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I've learned that patience is not passive. It's active. It's deliberate. It's choosing to respect you fully, even when I want more. And right now, I want more for myself too. Not to regain the past, but to become a better version of myself." Ka nodded, impressed despite herself. "That is enough," she said. "It doesn't have to be more than that for now." For a while, they worked in silence. The studio smelled faintly of wet pavement and fabrics, a mixture that had become familiar to Ka. Obira occasionally glanced at her sketches, nodding in approval without speaking. And in that quiet, a new rhythm began to emerge. One built not on fear, need, or control, but on mutual recognition and respect. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern continued. Ka thrived in her empire, traveling occasionally for inspiration, sourcing fabrics, meeting collaborators, and expanding her vision. Obira remained in the background, occasionally appearing at events, never imposing, always observing. Their interactions were brief and deliberate, measured, lacking the intensity of the past but carrying a quiet weight of understanding. One evening, after a long day at the studio, Ka found herself walking along the Lagos Lagoon. The city glimmered beneath the moonlight, reflecting on the water's surface in soft ripples. She paused, breathing in the humid air, feeling a sense of clarity she had never known in her younger years. Her phone vibrated, a message from Amaka. "He's here. By the waterfront. He says nothing, just wants to see you." Ka felt a flutter, not of fear, but of awareness. She looked down at the water, watching ripples form under the gentle movement of a passing boat. After a pause, she walked toward the edge, careful not to run, careful not to let emotion rush her. Obira was standing a few meters away, umbrella closed, hands in his pockets. He didn't smile, didn't call out, didn't demand attention. He simply waited, like someone giving her space to approach on her own terms. Ka stopped at a respectful distance. "You didn't need to come," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "But I wanted to. Not to intrude, not to ask for anything, just to exist near you. And to remind myself that distance doesn't have to hurt if it's chosen wisely." Ka considered his words. "Distance has been good for both of us," she said finally. "We've both learned to stand alone. And perhaps that's the only way we could ever stand together, too." He nodded, looking at the water. "I hope so," he said quietly. "Not just for us, but for the people we've become. For the lives we've built separately. And, if the time comes, maybe for something more." Ka glanced at him, noting the careful restraint in his gaze. She didn't feel the old tension of wanting to fix or reclaim anything. She only felt a cautious curiosity, an acknowledgement that two healed people could perhaps explore a new kind of closeness without losing themselves. "I don't know if that time will come," she said softly. "But I know we exist in a way that allows it to be possible if it ever does. And that is enough for now." Obira's expression softened. "Then I'll wait," he said. "Not to possess, not to reclaim, not to disrupt. Just to witness and respect." Ka smiled faintly. "Then do that," she said. "And let us both continue to grow in the meantime." Weeks passed, and life resumed its rhythm. Ka's work consumed her in the most fulfilling ways.